Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports with another football video, and today I'm going over my Week 7 power rankings of the 2024 NFL season. I do power rankings on the channel every single week, so if you enjoy this video, make sure to come on back next week for Week 8. So let's get right down into it. First off, as always, we start off with the dumpster fire. We have the Browns at 32, the Panthers at 31, the Patriots at 30, and the Dolphins at 29. The Patriots, the Panthers, and the Browns all lost this week. But the Patriots, I did move up one position above the Panthers because of the start of Drake May. Although Drake May had 3 turnovers, both of the interceptions were tipped, and the fumble was an absolutely massive hit. And so I think that with the 3 touchdowns that he had, Drake May had a relatively good game, and he played phenomenally well for a very first start in the NFL. That being said, it obviously could have been better, and I could be optimistic, putting us at 30 instead of 31 or 32. But I think that Drake May looked good, and I think that he has more potential than Andy Dalton or Deshaun Watson do. The Browns and the Panthers have both been the 2 worst teams along with the Patriots in the league this season. They both lost this week. Although the Browns played a pretty decent game against the Eagles, they only lost by 4 points. It was a 16-20 loss, but the Browns have only won 1 game this season. I believe it was week 2, and they have not been able to get back into the win column since then. The Panthers also lost this week to the Falcons. It wasn't really a close game. The Falcons are a much better team, so it wasn't really expected to be close. As for the Dolphins did not play this week. They were on bye, but they don't have Tua Tagovailoa anymore, and because of that, their team has been shown to be horrendous. Moving on, we have meh. These teams are all pretty bad, and I don't expect any of them to be making the playoffs. At 28, we have the Titans. At 27, we have the Jaguars. At 26, we have the Raiders. At 25, we have the Jets. And at 24, we have the Rams. The Titans have been up and down this season, but mostly down. Most recently, they did beat the Dolphins, which was a shining moment for them this season. But the Titans have generally been one of the worst teams in the league. Their offense can't move the ball very well, and their quarterback position is extremely up in the air. Their one shining positive thing is Tony Pollard, and Tony Pollard isn't even having a phenomenal season. At number 27, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. I almost dropped the Jaguars below the Titans after this week's performance. The Jaguars got absolutely demolished in their game in London. Gives me a little bit of hope for next week, thinking that the Patriots might be able to do the same thing. Trevor Lawrence just has been terrible this year. And they even put Mac Jones in at the end of the game. I think they should have put Mac Jones in sooner. I think that Mac Jones is eventually gonna get the starting job in Jacksonville once Trevor Lawrence loses a few more games. Jacksonville is 1-5. They're gonna be 1-6 after they lose to the Patriots next week, and they really are not looking great right now. At 2-4, number 26, we have the Raiders. The Raiders do have a couple of good wins on the season. One of them being against the Ravens. The Raiders are a weird team where they'll absolutely demolish a good team one week, and then the next 3 or 4 weeks in a row, they'll go back to being bad again. The Raiders are one of the least consistent teams in the league, and they're not very good. Aiden O'Connell is their quarterback, and Davante Adams is currently injured. I don't entirely remember who they played this week. They're just not that memorable of a team. They did lose this week, I do know that much. And so they're staying above Jacksonville just because they have a more impressive win than either the Titans or the Jaguars this season. The Jets are at 25. The Jets also have 2 wins. I almost put the Raiders above the Jets simply because the Jets have only beaten the Patriots and the Titans, and the Raiders have beaten the Baltimore Ravens. But I can't put Aaron Rodgers below Aiden O'Connell just yet. The Jets did fire Robert Saleh this week. If they lose to the Bills tomorrow, I'd probably put them below the Raiders in theory. But I don't expect them to be winning anything tomorrow. I think that firing Robert Saleh was not the best choice for the Jets, but it was a choice that they could make. I think that Aaron Rodgers is trying to control them like he did with the Packers, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work out for them. That being said, the Jets are probably going to end up with a losing record on the season, as they can only beat the worst teams in the league. As for the Rams can beat good teams, but they've had an extremely difficult schedule. They've beaten the Cardinals, who are pretty decent, and they have beaten the 49ers, who are, again, also pretty decent. With that being said, they've had one of the hardest schedules in the league, and they've they're 2-4, which is respectable. They're not great, but I think that they do have potential, and I think that the Rams could potentially be okay this season. Moving on to the hit or miss category, we have the Giants, the Seahawks, the Colts, and the Bengals. All of these teams either have 2 or 3 wins, and they can beat anyone in the league or lose to anybody in the league. The Giants at 2-4 lost this week to the Bengals. They lost last week, a couple weeks ago, to the Cowboys as well. And for the most part, the Giants will beat bad teams and they'll lose to good teams. But every once in a while, there can be a fluke in there. With that being said, the Giants beat the Seahawks last week, which was a pretty impressive win. But the Seahawks have shown since then to not be a fantastic team. The Seahawks have lost 3 games in a row, getting demolished in all 3 of those games. None of them have been close, and they've been against good teams, but they haven't, again, similarly to the Jets, they haven't beaten anybody significant. They beat the Patriots, they beat the Titans, and they beat somebody else pretty relatively terrible. I don't have all the schedules memorized. But Seattle has not had a good season. They started off undefeated. A lot of people thought this was Seattle's year. And then they lost 3 games in a row. They're all demolitions, and they need to kind of start winning some games before I can put them back up in the standings. The Colts are at 21. They are also at 3-3, but they've had a much more consistent season. They'll win a game and lose a game and win a game and lose a game. Again, they're always beating the teams that they're supposed to beat, and they're losing to the teams they're supposed to lose to. Some of their losses include a loss against the Jaguars, one against the Texans. Those are both divisional rivals. And overall, the Colts have had a pretty decent season. Joe Flacco has really reinvigorated the offense. And even though Anthony Richardson was playing well, Joe Flacco just has that veteran experience that has enabled him to help the offense more than Anthony Richardson was able to do. And at number 20, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals did win this week against the Giants, and the Bengals are in such an interesting position because they lost to the Patriots week 1. But outside of that loss to the Patriots, their season has not been too unpredictable. They've lost to very strong teams. They lost to Washington. They lost to the Ravens. Again, the Patriots loss shouldn't have happened. And then their wins are against teams. They've beaten all the teams except for the Patriots that they should have beaten. And so they are 2-4, but they're at a respectable 2-4. You know, it's a 2-4 where you can kind of see how they got there. With that being said, Joe Burrow also is in the MVP conversation. Joe Burrow is having one of the best seasons of his career. Today he had a 47-yard rushing touchdown. Joe Burrow is lighting up the field every single week, and the defense is really what's been destroying them. That's why this week they're able to win against the Giants, because the Giants play defense against themselves. So they don't really need a defense in order to beat the Giants. That being said, the Bengals have had a good season, and their offense is clicking. They just need to figure it out on defense, and then they'll be a very strong team. Moving on to mid, we have the Cowboys at 19, the Broncos at 18, the Saints at 17, the Cardinals at 16, and the Chargers at 15. The Cowboys got demolished for their second game of the season. The first demolition was against the Saints. The second demolition this week was against the Lions. The Cowboys are 3-3. They haven't beaten any teams that are anywhere near significantly decent, and they are having a horrendous season. The Broncos are 18. The Broncos are 3-3. The Broncos have also been all over the board. They demolished the Buccaneers a couple weeks ago, but they really just jump around as well. Bo Nix is having a pretty solid rookie season. He's not the best rookie. He's not as good as Caleb Williams, and he's definitely not as good as Jaden Daniels. But he's had a solid season. The Broncos can move the ball. They have a decent offense. This week they did not have a decent offense, but outside of this week, their offense has been pretty good. It's been firing on all cylinders. And the Broncos have had an okay season. They've done much better than people expected them to do. The Saints are at 17. They're at 2-4. They've lost 4 consecutive games. I probably should put them lower, but it's been a difficult 4 games. I think that the Saints have potential. I think that their rookie quarterback this week that was playing had a pretty solid game. I can't think of his name right now, but I had it earlier. He had a solid game. He played well, but the defense really let them down today. Tampa obviously scored 51 points, which is unacceptable. But the Saints also didn't score in the second half. This game was a shootout. They are up 27-24. The Buccaneers scored 27 points in the second half. If the Saints had just kept up, then they would have been able to win. But the offense could not keep up, and it just didn't work out. Spencer Rattler. At 16, we have the Cardinals, and at 15, we have the Chargers. The Cardinals have had the hardest schedule in the league. I will not hear any other team that could have had any schedule harder than the Cardinals. And they're 2-4. 2-4 is a respectable record for the season that the Cardinals have had. And they're playing pretty decent football. A couple of those games were pretty bad losses. They lost by a pretty significant margin. But they've also had a couple of blowouts. So I think that 16 is fair for the Cardinals. They're 2-4. They're trugging along. They're having a decent year. And it just hasn't been able to. They just need to get past the hump, and then they can start beating teams that are actually. They can start playing teams that are actually their level and start beating them. They did beat the 49ers, which was an impressive win, even though the 49ers have not been a great team this year. As for the Chargers at 15, I don't know what to do with them. The Chargers are 3-2. They have beaten the Broncos, but they haven't beaten anybody else significant, and I just really don't trust Justin Herbert or this defense or anything. They're at 15 here because their defense is the best defense here. They've allowed 66 points in 5 games, which is shocking for the Chargers defense. But I really don't trust that this defense is going to hold up all season. Moving on to could be good. We have the 49ers at 14, the Steelers at 13, the Bears at 12, and the Eagles at 11. The 49ers did move up this week after winning. Jordan Mason got injured this week, so now they are onto their third string running back. They beat Seattle. Seattle's on a losing streak. It wasn't the most impressive win ever, but they did put up 36 points. Last week they beat the Patriots, and again, the 49ers are in that hole this season where they can't beat anyone decent, and they haven't even had a hard schedule. They lost to the Rams, and they lost to the Cardinals, and they really haven't had a hard schedule. They just haven't played well. They're 3-3. Christian McCaffrey's been injured, which has been part of it, but Jordan Mason's played just as good as Christian McCaffrey could have. So I don't really know what's up with the 49ers, but they need to figure something out. They're 3-3. They could be doing worse, but they're not. The Steelers are at 13. They're 4-2. The Steelers have had a pretty decently hard schedule. They lost to the Chargers last week. This week they were able to bring it back and get a win. Again, it wasn't the most impressive win ever, but they were able to secure a win this week. And the Steelers have had a pretty middle-of-the-road season. Justin Fields has had a pretty middle-of-the-road year. They beat the Raiders this week, which isn't a phenomenal victory, but it's not the worst victory ever. The Raiders have been pretty okay. And they're 4-2. They're in second place in their division behind the Ravens. They're in a decent position to make the playoffs in the AFC. And Mike Tomlin's not going to go below 500. So the Steelers will probably hover between 10 and 16 most of the season. The Bears are at 12. Caleb Williams is looking phenomenal. The Bears have not beaten anybody significant, again, as with a lot of the teams below them. But they are 4-2, and Caleb Williams is slinging it. They've put up 35 points this week, and Caleb Williams is on fire. I don't think that he's as good as Jaden Daniels so far this season, but he's had a very solid year, and I'm excited to see where he goes. And DeAndre Swift has finally woken up. DeAndre Swift has awoken. It's been a couple weeks in a row now that DeAndre Swift has been to his old self. It took a couple weeks to get into it. He was having, I think, 1 or 2 yards a carry for the first 2 weeks. The last 3 or 4 weeks, DeAndre Swift has been back. Moving on to number 11, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have had, again, another up and down season. Another unexpected year. They are 3-3, and for the most part, I don't even know what the issue is. I think that they've had a little bit of a difficult schedule. They're not meeting expectations, and the entirety of their division in the NFC East has been below par this season, except for Washington. Washington has been extremely good, and that's why they're at number 10. We have the Commanders at 10, the Bills at 9, the Packers at 8, the Buccaneers at 7, and the Falcons at 6 in our strong contenders category. The Washington Commanders did lose this week when they played against the Ravens. This was their second loss of the season. They're 4-1 coming into this game. And the Commanders have had a good year. They've had a solid year. Jaden Daniels has really shown that he is ready to play in the NFL, that he is ready to not only play in the NFL, but possibly be a top 10 quarterback. His connection with Terry McLaurin has gotten better and better every single week. Their Olamide Zacchaeus has gotten better every single week. The whole team around Jaden Daniels has been improving. The defense has been getting stronger, and they weren't able to do it this week against the Ravens. The Ravens are a juggernaut of a team, but they're sitting at a 4-2 record, and they haven't had the easiest schedule in the league. So I think that Washington's had a pretty good start to the season. Buffalo's at 9. Buffalo's on a 2-game losing streak. They're going to play the Jets tomorrow. If they lose to the Jets, they'll move down to 10. I'm not putting them below the Eagles yet. And then if they beat the Jets, they're staying where they are. That's not going to bump them above the Packers. The Bills have lost 2 consecutive games. One of them was a blowout. One of them was a pretty close game. They lost to the Ravens and the Texans, 2 of the best teams in the league. And then their other games have been mid. They beat us. No, they didn't beat the Patriots yet. They beat the Dolphins without Tua. They beat the Cardinals week 1, which was a close game, and then they had another game against a team that's bad. So the Bills have had a very unimpressive season. Josh Allen hasn't even had his best statistical season. He hasn't even had close to his best statistical season. He's been pretty okay for his standards. So Buffalo has not been impressive this year. As for the Packers at number 8, the Packers could be higher at this point, but we're waiting and seeing. Jordan Love's had a great year. He's thrown, I believe, 12 touchdowns in 3.5 games, which is phenomenal. They almost beat the Vikings, who are currently the best team in the league. They lost 29-31. It was a very close game. They had chances, but they were down by 2 scores for most of the second half. And then the other game that they lost was week 2 when Jordan Love was injured. Jordan Love has been the lifeblood of this team the last couple of seasons. He has definitely filled the shoes of Aaron Rodgers, and he's playing phenomenal football. He did have a lot of turnovers in the Vikings game. He's had a lot of turnovers overall, but he's been making it up with his phenomenal quarterback play and his phenomenal ability to move the ball down the field. The Buccaneers are at 7 and the Falcons are at 6. These are the 2 teams atop the NFC South. Both of these teams are tied at 4-2. The Falcons have beaten the Buccaneers, which does give them a tiebreaker edge. And the Falcons have had one of the hardest schedules in the league, almost as hard, if not harder than the Falcons. They only have 2 losses this season. The first one was week 1 against the Steelers, which was probably mostly because the offense hadn't had time to gel yet. If they played the Steelers today, I do believe the Falcons would have beaten them. And then they lost to Kansas City in a controversial game. The Falcons arguably could have won that game if a call had gone separately, but because of that, they are now at number 6. If they hadn't beaten the Chiefs, they would arguably be at number 2 right now, honestly, if they had beaten the Chiefs in that game. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers demolished the Saints this week, 51-27. They would be higher, but I'm not going to move the Falcons down in a win. The Buccaneers have had a very up and down season, including a loss to the Broncos a couple weeks ago, 26-7. But Baker Mayfield has played very well. Baker Mayfield today threw 4 touchdowns and 3 picks and 400 yards. He lit up the statistics board today, Baker Mayfield did. And he's having a pretty good season. He's having one of the better seasons of his career. And the Buccaneers are 4-2 with him. Oh, and obviously Chris Godwin today had 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was on a different planet. Finally, we have the NFL's elite. We have the Lions at 5, the Ravens at 4, the Texans at 3, the Chiefs at 2, and the Vikings at 1. The Vikings are in first. The other 4 teams in this category are all, in my opinion, effectively tied. Kansas City has one of the best defenses in the league, but their offense has been subpar this season for Kansas City standards. With that being said, also they've barely won most of their games against good teams. They barely won the Ravens game because there was a touchdown that got called back. And then there was a bunch of other things that happened in that game that was questionable towards the end. Again, there was other questionable ref decisions in the Falcons game and in the Bengals game. 3 of Kansas City's wins were questionable at best. I think a lot of people would agree with that. And so Kansas City has not played like the best team in the league. The Vikings have consistently won every game that they've played with a significant margin, or at least a significant buffer going into the fourth quarter. And they've beaten some very strong teams, including a demolition of the Houston Texans at number 3 in the rankings. A couple weeks ago, Houston lost 34-7 to the Vikings. They are now back up at number 3. They were back up at number 3 last week after beating the Bills, but they're staying there this week. Their only losses to the number 1 team in the league, so I think that 3 is a fair spot for them, even though it was a pretty bad loss. Number 4 is the Ravens, and number 5 is the Lions. The Ravens are at 4, even though they're 4-2. Because their only losses were a fluke loss to the Raiders and then a loss to Kansas City again in that questionable game. And then and then the Lions game, they had a little bit of a fluke loss to the Buccaneers, even though the Buccaneers are a strong team. And they've won every other game of the season, including a 40-point win over the Cowboys this week, winning 47-9. Kansas City, Houston, Baltimore, and the Lions, I really don't want to rank them. I think that they should all just have a tie in second place. So if you're upset that your team is in 3, 4, or 5 and you think they should be number 2, I think they should be number 2 as well. I think that there should be a 4-way tie number 2. But I do need to rank them somehow. And so this is the way that I'm putting it right now, just because the Lions are the least balanced team. And the Chiefs are the most balanced team. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Also, make sure to join the Discord. We talk about football every week. It's a lot of fun. So with that being said, I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace.